have other people here? Oh, okay. We have 13 people in the room so far. And I think we had about 3 times that signed up.
If anybody wants to go into the chat of our participants and let us know, you don't have to give your name, I guess, but let us know where you're viewing from. That would be helpful.
So Steve and James from Sevilla, Pennsylvania. Hi, Steve and James. And Elizabeth in Scranton. Awesome. It's 7 o'clock exactly. Oh, there's Dan and Kristen. Can you hear the sound from my computer as well or not? Would it help to turn off the sound on one of these? Oh, okay. Okay. Can you hear when other people talk on the computer? That's what I mean. Is if you turn your sound off, that might stop the garbage. Okay. We have 19 people here now. And some of those, or at least one of those is 2 people on one viewing. Oh, and Jennifer in Washington. I don't want to start before, now we're up to 20. I don't want to start before people get here, but I don't want to wait too late either. Oh, Kristen at Journey's Inn Farm in Sterling. Okay. Hello, Kristen. I think I like teaching in person because I can look in the hallway and see who's about to walk in. And 2. Property. It's just a matter of turning off the sound. You can probably just turn the volume off on your taskbar. We'll just wait until 7:05 and then start with whoever is here at 7:05. How's that? Barbara Lewis from Holmesdale, and there is feedback, and it's because of yours being connected. Do you know what? Would you be comfortable sitting over here where you set me up? Right, because you turned off the audio. If the feedback stops, then you can hear me just fine through there. That's it. Okay. That's why I want to say, can you hear them? But we don't know yet. Oh, Katie from Bear Creek made it. That's my neighbor. Right. Yeah, we're waiting for 7:05 so that we've got time for people to get in. Oh, this is Zim, currently in Virginia but live in North Carolina. Hey, Zim. Okay, well that's 7:05. So hopefully anybody who was going to come just a couple of minutes late has made it in. So everybody, and there are sounds from outside. Okay. Anyway. Okay, well, we want to say welcome and thank everybody for being here. It looks like we've got 20, 24 now. There were 25 people here. We obviously could not do this without everybody who signed in. So we really appreciate everybody being here. We're thrilled to see you, or at least see your names over there on the side, something like that. My name is Weaver Cooper. I'm a member of North Branch Friends. And for people who aren't aware, Friends are Quakers. It means the same thing. The Religious Society of Friends, and picked up the nickname Quakers a long time ago, and it stuck. So if I say Friends and it sounds like there's a capital F, I mean Quakers. I'm also a lesbian, been active in the LGBTQIA plus community since the days when we were excited to add an L to that G. And I'll apologize now that it took us so long to add in the rest of the letters and stir in a plus sign and make a better stew. When I first got started, we didn't have all the letters there, and we should have. Our Quaker meeting, decided to host a series of webinars like this one as a way to make our involvement in social justice issues and our tiny meeting itself more visible. Partly because this is Pride Month, we decided to start with this topic, and we really appreciate our panelists' patience and everybody else's patience with the fact that we are just learning how to use this technology to host public events online. Like everybody else, I guess we were meeting privately through Zoom all through the pandemic, but we were really working to learn this technology and figure out how to make it function for us. You may be wondering what Friends have to do with Pride or why we support full rights for our transgender neighbors. As Friends, we share a belief that there's that of God in every person and that every single human being is at once equal and divine. And what we call God, or the light, or the inner voice, or Jesus, or Goddess, or by any other name, and I'll tell you up front, we have a lot of diversity in terms of those details. But whatever words we use, is that light, that sense, can use any of our voices to speak at any time, and that guidance continues to be active today. And for that reason, we've always stood up for the rights of oppressed and vulnerable people, including prisoners, immigrants, slaves, many others. But it's actually a lot more specific than that. Quaker association with the Pride Parade and with Pride itself goes back to the absolute roots of the celebration, at least with the Stonewall riots. June 28, 1969 in Greenwich Village, some demonstrators ran away from some police because they had to so that they could survive. And they took refuge in the nearby Quaker meeting house as they hid from the riot police. And so right there, as soon as people were running away from the riots at Stonewall, there we were. And I don't know if any friends were there for the riots themselves or not. That didn't come about just because of happenstance or luck of geography or the house happened to be there either. Let's try to clock back a few more centuries, just for a moment. In 1656, one of our founders, George Fox, called on business people, and I'll read the quote here, said, "Do rightly, justly, truly, holily, equally to all people in all things," and he was speaking in commercial and other contexts, specifically admonishing them to use just weights and just measures. In other words, to charge everybody the same thing and otherwise treat people fairly. And he said, "Whatever your calling, live in the power of truth and wisdom of God to answer that just principle of God in all people upon the earth." So from our very beginning, we're calling for equal treatment of people from all walks of life, and not just in the abstract, in very practical, tangible ways. And Friends don't just oppose classism, although treating folks, knights and nobles equally is kind of what got a whole lot of Quakers thrown in jail for quite a while. Our forebears opposed sexism. Women held equal standing in our meetings from the very beginning. And because of that, gained experience speaking and some foundation, so that about 200 years later, it was Quakers who were the driving force behind the Seneca Falls Convention. And in a time period when women were generally not allowed to speak in public, we actually had famous orators like Lucretia Mott traveling the country and giving speeches. So, there we go. I have notes here, but turn them backwards. Okay. So if we fast forward again to the early days of the work on LGBTQIA+ rights, Friends wrote the first modern religious text to positively explore same-sex relationships. It was titled Towards a Quaker View of Sex. Was started in 1957, published in 1963. So it used the terminology of the 50s. So keep that in mind. It's not the terminology that we see almost 70 years later. Said, "It is the nature and quality of a relationship that matters. The same criteria seem to us to apply whether a relationship is heterosexual or homosexual." So in the 50s, Friends were saying, we want equality. We could fill in lots of gaps there, but I'll fast forward again and just say that at yearly meeting 2009, Quakers were the first religious organization in Britain to formally recognize same-sex marriage. And there were a few isolated meetings that actually refused to celebrate any marriages until all marriages were legal as part of that push. There's a Quaker faith community that originated in the 70s. So we're going back 50 years. Friends for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer concerns. And they seek to offer an oasis to those who have been spurned by the world at large. And their introductory materials state clearly that racial inclusion and radical love bring further light to Quaker testimony in life. And I love that inclusion and radical love. That's nice. So our general position is clear. But we recognize that although some people, at least in our meeting, have attended some training workshops or have been actively involved in issues of transgender rights in the past, others of us have very little background. We might have been focused on other things, issues of poverty or racism, healthcare, water rights, nonviolence, immigration, education, environmentalism, all kinds of things, hundreds of different worthy causes. Or we could be new to all of it, because Friends welcome newcomers and guests, and we have young people who are just getting started. So as a meeting, we want to learn more about this really important topic, and it is important to us. Okay, not only so that we can be better prepared to welcome any transgender guest who might show up, we want to know in advance so that we don't accidentally, offend somebody when we're trying to be welcoming and inclusive. But also so that we can be better allies to this community on June 23rd than we were this morning. And hopefully we can all grow and get better. I want to let you know we're a community that seeks truth beyond words. Friends don't rely just on words. It's very experiential. And sometimes that truth is phrased in unexpected ways. So we want everybody here to feel safe, to ask any genuine questions that you might have in a spirit of communal seeking and learning. If you don't know how to phrase your question eloquently, just ask it awkwardly. It's okay. Awkwardness is just fine. Absolutely okay to be awkward here. The only thing that's not okay is violence, and including verbal violence. If things just get tense, we might pause for a minute and seek the light together in silence. It just means be quiet and turn inward for a moment and think about where we want to be together. Okay, but Quakers have almost 4 centuries of history of standing up to violence and refusing to tolerate it. And in this digital context, one of the things that Zoom gave us is a very gentle eject button. So if somebody is intentionally hostile or attacks a panelist or a participant verbally, then we will quietly and calmly use our eject button and boot that aggressor out. It's not okay to attack guests in our home or anyone anywhere for that matter. You can catch up if you get booted out by seeing the recorded copy on YouTube in a few days. It will be there. We don't really expect that though. And I've been talking for a whole lot, and I'm excited to hear what our panelists have to say. So I'm going to stop talking and turn it over to them. So panelists, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Who wants to go first? Lexi, go for it.
Hello, everyone. I am Lexi Bray. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. Your Majesty and Your Grace will also do beautifully. I am located in Des Moines, Iowa. I'm an actress, an advocate, an activist, an educator. I actually work in early childhood education. I am a pre-K teacher. I have a wonderful classroom filled with 20 4 and 5-year-olds who are getting ready for kindergarten in the fall. I'm not quite ready to let my babies go. They've been with me. Some of them have been with me for 2 years, and I'm having a big mom moment, and I've got to let them all go. I'm here to speak and answer questions because I certainly offer a different view in being a trans person because I live at the intersection of Black and trans. So here I am to give you a perspective as to what goes on in my life and in the lives of people that look like me.
Lindsay, do you want to go or? Hi, I'm Spencer Bergstead. He, him, his. I am, let's see, where do I start? In some ways, I'm your average middle-aged white dude in suburbia. But that is, a very small part of my story. I am a trans man. I transitioned 27 years ago at a time when the world was very different than it is today. My educational background is that I went to law school. I practiced as an attorney for 28 years, but I've been doing advocacy and diversity training for over 30 years, both around trans issues, but also around larger LGBTQ issues. I am the parent of a child with special needs, and so I also view the world through that filter as well, in terms of how can we make the world more accessible and inclusive for people with disabilities. For the past probably 10 years or so, my work has primarily been focused on doing diversity and inclusion training around trans issues with businesses, medical care providers, and in the educational setting. And that work is both doing work around helping organizations with appropriate employment policies, but also doing direct training with folks in terms of working with coworkers who may be trans, but also in terms of customer care, which is particularly important in the healthcare setting and also in retail settings. So that's a little bit about me.
My name is Lindsay Sickler. They, them, theirs. I'm non-binary. I have been a community advocate for over 20 years, and I work specifically with TLGBTQIA youth, 21 and under mostly, although recently that expanded to all age ranges. I am a cancer survivor. I took care of my mother with multiple sclerosis, lupus, and some mental health issues from the time I was 9. I am a caregiver. My gender journey has been really interesting, and full of stumbles. But what I have found for me is that I kind of came full circle, because for a long time, I had to come out multiple times. I'm sure that this story is familiar. But when I tried to come out non-binary the first time, I got shoved right back in the closet by my friends, family, and loved ones, most of whom were trans. So I waited for a little while. I did some more soul searching and discovered that non-binary doesn't necessarily have a look, and became more comfortable in my own body. Um, I am very goddess shaped. I have been goddess shaped my entire life, and there's no getting around that. And so I began to embrace my femininity, but also really dug into not having to be any of it. I can't help how my body is shaped. I can't help what's comfortable on me. It wasn't until coming back around to non-binary that I actually enjoy things like doing my hair and my makeup now, because I don't feel obligated to do it. I don't feel like it's a chore. And I am blessed to be around young people of all variety, queer, trans, non-binary, all colors of the rainbow, who are very, very supportive and loving. And all those people that shoved me back into the closet are no longer in my life. But this is, I kind of, I say I'm a lot, forgive me. But I'm gonna take it as I am type of person. This is me, all of me. I am very queer. I am very loud. I am very colorful. And I also am a little bit shy, which I know is a little bit of an oxymoron. But the stuff that I do is because I care about people, and specifically about the community. I lost my job of 16 years in the nonprofit field, thank you, COVID, last June. And so I have also been searching that way. And so I spend all of my time right now volunteering with different TLGBTQIA plus organizations and events. And that's kind of me in a nutshell. Do we want to go to questions?
Looks like we have a hint of a question here in the chat. Andrea Palancar would like to know what, as a medical provider, people would like for her to know. I happen to know who Andrea is. She's a primary care provider and MD. Okay, so what is it that you wish medical providers knew?
Well, there's a lot, as you can imagine. One of the things that's true for trans people in general is that large numbers of us don't have access to competent medical care. At least between 20 and 25% of us do not have medical insurance. And so we're paying out of pocket. There's a great degree of hesitancy from people to go to the doctor because they've been misgendered or othered in some way, or simply denied care, which happens all too often. So what can medical care providers do to make themselves and their practices more comfortable and competent. So there's a couple of things. One is look at your intake form. First and foremost, is your intake form inclusive of people? If it's not, then that's the perfect place to start. Most of the time, I think any of us who are LGBTQ go into medical care providers' offices and find that who we are is completely ignored in the intake process. Nowhere is there anywhere for us to put our pronouns, or the difference between sometimes what our legal name is versus the name that we use. If your form simply asks whether people are single, married, divorced, or widowed, then you're missing out on what kinds of relationships people are in, which sometimes may not be with just one other person. So think about whether or not you're looking at the breadth of how people experience their lives. So that's one place to start, is with your intake. Make sure that your front desk staff understands well how to interact with people. And that can be about a broad range of things, not only not misgendering people, using whatever their name is that they use, but sometimes it can be other things as well. Think about whether or not you're making sure that patients are feeling welcomed when they come in. Just as an example, which actually has nothing to do with being trans necessarily, but I have a friend who happens to be on the autism spectrum who needs to have someone with her at appointments in order for her to feel like she's going to be safe and that she's going to get answers to all of her questions and not be overwhelmed in the process. And she had a front desk person recently who kept insisting to her that her spouse could not come into the appointment with her. And eventually she got frustrated enough that she basically very loudly told this person that now they were forcing her to disclose something about their medical history in the waiting room in front of other people, when all they simply needed was someone to go with them and be an advocate for them in their appointment. If you work with hospitals, one of the things that I would urge you to do is to also urge the hospital to change their forms, but not just their forms. Think about other things that might come up. For example, if somebody's going in for surgery, typically one of the issues that they may have is that they'll need to use a bedpan or a urinal in the bed until they're able to ambulate to a commode. Simply ask every single person, would you like a urinal or would you like a bedpan? You have no idea what anybody's configuration is or what's going to be more comfortable for them in any given setting. I myself have had the experience of, thankfully, having hospital staff who've been really accommodating, with the exception of one male nurse who looked at me very oddly when I said, please bring me a bedpan rather than a urinal. He's the only person I ever had an issue with. And that was for a knee replacement surgery of all things. So that's something to think about. Really urge everybody from front desk workers to clinicians to CNAs, even janitorial staff, whoever might come into contact with patients should get appropriate training about how to be respectful of people, their identities, and their bodies. If for some reason you need to have information about somebody's legal name that is different from the name that they use, or if they have not been able to change their gender markers for whatever reasons, whether that's because they're still trying to maintain certain coverage on their insurance, or because they live in a state that makes it more difficult for them to change their gender marker, at least find somewhere on the initial page that any clinician that looks at it will see, this is the name to use, these are the pronouns to use. If the person has a partner and you need to know that, here's their partner's name and pronouns. Any of those things, as seemingly small as they are huge when it comes to people feeling like they have good access to care. And what I can guarantee you is that when you establish yourself as a caring and competent physician, when it comes to trans and non-binary people, the amount of additional patients that you get will expand enormously. Because we do talk to one another and we know who the trans competent and trans friendly doctors are. Whether you're a doctor, chiropractor, dentist, doesn't matter. The word will get therapist, the word will get out that you are someone that people can trust, not just you, but everybody that you work with in your clinic setting.
I just want to add, I want to second everything that you just said. I think it's imperative for folks to be given SOGI training. That's a sexual orientation, gender identity expression, and not just to take it once, but to have refresher courses. I think there needs to be some, I've had experiences, and in my community, I've been privy to others because often I have taken people to doctor's appointments and been witness to some really bad behavior, and there's no repercussions. So if you're a doctor and you have staff, then you need to hold them accountable for how they treat your patients. And that's whether they're trans, queer, fat, any kind of accessibility issue. Like, you need to be wary of all those things. And there are simple things too. This is not a heavy lift. I think a lot of people feel like it's overwhelming. It's not. A second to reviewing the forms, make sure that the pronouns are in there. And also, if you don't have time or aren't fully aware of the pronouns that are out there that folks are using, because there's them, they, theirs, there's he, she, but there's also neopronouns, and they go all over the place, and there's new ones all the time. Leave an open space so people can self-identify. Strongly encourage, because I have been in situations with people where they have chosen name on the front of the chart and then walked back in the hospital with people and they were still using their birth name. And not cool. There's already stress about being in the hospital, and then you have to deal with people misgendering you. Simple things like finding posters and brochures and things that accurately represent the people that you want to serve. And I can tell you 110%, as the co-founder of Trans Pride Pittsburgh, which has been around for 11 years, and one of the people that put together the now 6-year-old Trans Pride Pittsburgh Health and Wellness Conference, we do talk to one another constantly, all the time. And if you do not take care of us, we do not say your name again. You do not get us as patients. And there are lists going, I don't mean to sound threatening, but I know in my area, we all talk, and there are lists that people go, have you gone to this person? Oh no, it was a bad experience. So nobody goes to them. And that, and if they don't make, people are approached and, hey, did you know about the situation? And, are you willing to work on it? But if they're not, like, we just don't go back. And people have lost a sincere amount of business, because not only are we talking to one another, but we have family, friends, and loved ones that love us enough to stop supporting the places that aren't treating us well. It's not a heavy lift. It's truly not. It's okay if you don't fully understand, but you need to give every person respect and dignity. And that includes using their name. It is not a preferred name. It is not a preferred pronoun. It is their name and their pronoun, and making sure that you address people's individual needs. I think that a lot of the trip ups that the medical community faces is because they try to cookie cutter everything. And I understand, but that doesn't work. We're all human beings, we're all individual, and we all have different needs.
And I want to sort of expand on that a little bit, which is, from a clinical standpoint, I think sometimes it's easy to fall into the trap of, you're having this healthcare issue because of, right? Because you're trans, because you're on hormones, because your weight is a certain weight, whatever. There is a bias that exists instead of looking at individual patients. So, for example, one of the things that happens to trans men fairly often is that if we come into the doctor and we now have high blood pressure or polycythemia or something, doctors immediately say, well, that's because you're trans, and so we're just going to take you off testosterone. To which my response is, well, what do you do with cisgender men who come in with the same issue? Because that's how you should be treating me. Don't treat my identity, treat the issue that I'm coming in with. And one of the things that we see repeatedly, especially in emergency situations, and primarily and often for folks who live in more rural areas where they don't have necessarily the best trans competent care, is somebody may go into the emergency room because they have a compound fracture that needs surgical repair, and the hospital turns them away because they say, well, we don't have anybody that does trans health. Well, I'm here for a compound fracture, not because I'm trans. Didn't get the compound fracture because I'm trans. Just treat the compound fracture. But there is that kind of a bias, which ultimately it boils down to, we don't want to treat trans people, so we're going to turn you away, which to me violates your Hippocratic oath. So look at the patient as an individual. Go ahead, Lexi. I'm sorry.
I just saw someone post about working in health insurance, and I'm going to address this issue because when I was going to go for top surgery, the medical hoops and how I was treated by the insurance company was absolutely insane. It literally was, well, we need a letter from, we need a letter from your second cousin's vet, and, we need a letter from your second cousin's vet, who operated on their pet mountain lion, before we could work with you. I literally remember talking on the phone to one of the women at the insurance company, and I have never been talked down to so much in my life, because this person basically told me that I didn't know what I was doing and that I shouldn't be doing this. What I found interesting was that in making me jump through all of these hoops to get these various letters, because I have friends all over the country, I found it interesting that it seemed so arbitrary in who a letter needed to come from. Now, I'm going to say this because I'm going to watch people's faces. One of my letters saying that I was competent to have this surgery was written by the executive director of the Gender Center from Los Angeles. And my insurance company said that this person was not qualified to write the letter. But this is what this person does for a living. So I often feel like that there are people sitting behind desks, like you said, Spencer, pressing buttons when they have no idea. I opted not to get top surgery for 2 reasons. One, I'm a type 2 diabetic, and I've just been struggling maintaining that particular aspect of health. The second was, I didn't want to talk to the people at the insurance company again. It wasn't worth that. It wasn't worth being demeaned and being mistreated. And so I learned to, like Lindsay said, I learned to love the body that I'm in. And that became more important, loving the frame that I'm in versus doing that. I literally just switched up my med regimen and raised my estrogen dosage, and oh, look, it was a wonderful thing. So I think when it comes to, I know that these things are case by case basis, but my goodness, treat people with dignity. I have often found that occasionally medical professionals and people working behind the scenes, I get it. You do this day in and day out every day, and there are people who don't listen, and et cetera, et cetera. Some people lack human compassion. I simply want you to come to the table and be compassionate. You know, it's the golden rule, for goodness sake. Treat people the way you want to be treated.
One of the things that's been interesting with insurance over the past, particularly over the past 5 or 6 years, is there are now a number of states where state insurance commissioners have made it clear that all insurance plans offered in the state must include trans care. That doesn't necessarily always mean, as Lexi was saying, that the people that are sitting in the insurance companies' offices know what their own policies require them to pay for. And the reality is that those of us who are trans and non-binary run into discrimination 1,000 different ways every single day. Some of it's incredibly overt, some of it is not. But traversing those kind of bureaucracies is part of the struggle. And you're sitting here on this webinar watching 3 people who are incredibly strong, who are able to advocate not only for themselves but for others. But there are an awful lot of people who do not have that same kind of confidence. They don't have the kind of support, both personally and community-wise, that some of the rest of us do. And so navigating those kinds of bureaucratic roadblocks becomes insurmountable to the point that people just give up and they just don't bother anymore.
Yeah, I want to add to that quickly, just because I mentioned that I'm a cancer and a ovarian cancer survivor. I was diagnosed at 15. I love kids. My whole life is young adults. I never wanted to produce any of my own. I have known this from a very young age. And at 44 years old, I have still not been able to secure health care in order to get a hysterectomy. I am in pain every month. I call it my one-armed bandit because there's only one thing in there, but it still manages to pain me greatly. And I have repeatedly been refused because at first it was because I was too young and I needed to have babies, despite the fact that I didn't want to have babies. I have everybody else's babies. I take care of everyone. I don't need my own. And then it was, well, at your size, you really need to have those hormones. It has nothing, like, I literally, if I were to pluck 20 of my friends who are of trans experience and want to have any kind of surgery done, 18 of them have been able to have some kind of surgery with little problem in comparison to what I'm going through just to have my hysterectomy. Several of them in the last year were able to get both top surgery and hysterectomies at the same time. And I'm not quite sure what I'm doing wrong, but it's been a shit show. And to be honest, like, despite the kind of pain that I'm in, I've stopped trying. Because I'm tired of having to keep having these same conversations. Being a cancer survivor, I had a scare last year because I had some issues happening, and I ended up going to a new doctor, and I was told that I didn't know what I was talking about and that I just needed to calm down. And I explained calmly that, at 44 years old, I've already had cancer once. I had thyroid issues, which I don't have a thyroid anymore. Like, I don't want to play around. If there's something wrong, could you please help me? And being fat and queer and non-binary did not help. And she called me. I help with Pride every year in some way, shape, or form. So Pride weekend is always crazy for me. And she called me the day before Pride to tell me, oh yeah, no, you might be right. We should definitely go in and take that out. and it was awful. I got talked down to. She actually didn't speak to me directly throughout the entire procedure. She talked to my best friend who came with me. And like it was like I didn't exist. And this is as a fat queer person, not even taking the gender stuff in consideration. It has always been a struggle, and it would just be great if medical providers could actually listen to their clients. Period. As somebody that has been a health educator for all of my adult life, I have talked to people about sex and HIV and drug and alcohol and pregnancy prevention, and I know a thing or three about these things. It would just be nice to be listened to. And I know I'm not the only one that feels that way.
I want to thank all three of our panelists for speaking to the medical issues, because that's really important, and I'm fascinated. And since I'm really interested in that, I could probably listen to it the whole time. But I'm looking at realizing that we've spent a lot of time on medical things specifically. I want to be sure we also cover some of the other topics. We see some general questions in here to kind of build a foundation for those. Could you tell us what if you walked into any place, not necessarily a medical place, but any organization, any faith organization, any social club, any library, post office, what would immediately make you feel included, like this is a place where you belong?
Go ahead, Lexi.
I'm an artist. I am a classically trained singer, a classically trained dancer. I spend more time with children than any one human being needs. I tend to walk into a room and automatically feel like I belong in any place. And that comes from growing up in an urban area in Chicago. And so let me put a different perspective on it. Growing up Black, there were a lot of moments where I was told I didn't belong in spaces. And I've spent so much of my life often being the only Black person doing the thing that it is that I'm doing. So a lot of times I just walk into a space and I automatically assume that I'm going to be the only one that looks like me anyway. So I just go in and do it. I don't really have time to think about it. I don't have time to be fearful. If something has to be done and I have to do it, I have to just go do it. And so when I added the transness to it, to me, it was just going to be, there's a phrase that I use all the time that came from my parents where I'm like, oh, it's the same shit, different day. And so it literally was just one more thing to add to the list. Okay, I've often said I started life as a Black femme boy on the southwest side of Chicago. So Black and male in the society we live in, those are already strikes, according to some people. Then we tack on femme. Oh, that's one more strike. Because how many times do you get mistreated because you're a woman or have female tendencies? Then let's move down the road later and transition. So I catch hell from everybody. So at this point, I say, whatever, put on your best pair of pumps, walk the door, keep walking. And if anybody has an issue, that says more about them than it does about me. And that's the truth.
In terms of I mean, much like Lexi, I'm pretty comfortable wherever I go. I mean, it doesn't matter to me whether it's country club or a dive bar. I'm going to be fine. And I acknowledge that some of that is absolutely the result of the privilege that I have looking the way that I look, because people presume that I'm cisgender. They presume that I'm heterosexual, which I'm not. So I get to traverse a lot of spaces pretty freely because of that. What that does do for me is impart more of a responsibility on my part to make sure that other folks are going to be equally comfortable in every space that they walk into. So whenever I hear somebody telling a misogynistic joke, I'm going to call it out because I don't think they're funny. If somebody's telling a racist joke, I'm going to call that out. If somebody says something ableist, I'm going to call that out. Whenever I see young queers out in the world, I make sure, and I live in a fairly rednecky area north of Seattle. I make sure that every queer kid that works at Starbucks and Mod Pizza and Safeway knows that they're seen every time I go in. I make sure to call them by whatever name is on their name badge. I comment in some way about, oh, your nails look great. I love what you did with your hair. Something affirming about how they're presenting themselves to the world. I cannot underscore enough for you how important it is to be seen, to be acknowledged. And it is not an understatement to say that, particularly for trans and non-binary youth, it is a health crisis to not see them. Over 50% of trans boys attempt suicide. Over 50%. Over 30% of trans girls attempt suicide. If you look at trans people as a whole, 41% of us have attempted suicide. That's like 4 times the national average for any group of people. That's even more so than just for queer kids in general. So simply being affirming when you see something, when you see someone, or actively putting, calling out when somebody tries to say something in public that's demeaning, whether that's in your workplace, whether that's at your restaurant that you go to, no matter where you are, you always have the ability to stand up for those who are the most marginalized. And if you feel safe in doing that, then absolutely do it. And at least from my experience, I'm not a tall guy. I'm like 5'6". But I guarantee you that there is no one that will challenge me if I'm willing to stand up and say, no, you're not going to do that today. That's not funny. Take it back. And I don't care whether it's one person or 5 or 10 people that are all standing there. I will call all of them out. If nothing else, they're all going to go to jail if they do anything to me, guaranteed. And what's the worst that can happen to me? Well, I might die. But if I do, I did it being a principled person. And that's more important to me than just about anything.
I just I want to second what everybody else said, but as folks that maybe don't identify as part of the LGBTQ continuum, but an ally, there are really simple, small things that you can do, and that it is affirming. But getting a little trans pride pin, a little rainbow pin, things that say I'm an ally, put it on your purse, have it on your car. And when you have a chance and you see, just say hello. I cannot tell you what a difference it makes. Just a little bit of eye contact, a smile, how you doing? Because often, back when I identified as a lesbian, I made my partner at the time, there were just tiny rainbows. I got her a rainbow wallet. I had a rainbow thing on the bag I carried. And every time we went out, we met queer people every time. And it was the little rainbow. Oh, are you family? Yes. Yes. And we're like, oh, hi, are you part, are you from this community? Yes. Just letting people know that they're, again, just seconding, letting people know that they're seen, and that they don't have to hide who they are, and that they're good just as they are in the moment that they are, is incredibly impactful for youth and adults alike.
And other small signaling things can be things like hang a pride flag in front of your house. Even if you're not queer yourself, let other people know that your house is a safe house. If you own a business, put some kind of a sticker on the window as people are walking into your business to let them know that it's a safe space. Those are seemingly small and inconsequential things, but I guarantee you that we see them and it makes a difference for us.
I don't really get the option of hiding because I travel all over the country as an entertainer. And so when I walk into a room, people know who I am. And even in my own community, people know who I am. I've had kids. I literally was just at an event on Saturday, and I did a film a few months ago, and someone walked up to me and asked me if I was actually one of the performers, and said that the scene that they watched them in made them feel seen, and they thanked me for that. Like I said, I don't get to hide. You know, the sort of Alexandra experience is a lot, you know, and so I don't get to, like, I have a couple littles in my class. I have a little boy who very much is a princess boy, and the one thing that he for me is very hard to see him get ready to go to kindergarten, because I know that the world can be a very cruel place, and I want to be there to protect him every step of the way. And I know I'm not going to be able to. And I am hoping and I am praying that I gave him enough magic, both my own and encouraged his enough to know that he can make it through anything. That's where I am. You know, I get to stand and be that gateway. And it's a wonderful thing. And I want, like everybody's saying, children especially, and young adults and youth, they need to be seen. And I understand that somewhere in being a Black woman, being able to turn and look at a young queer kid as someone that they view as an aunt, a mom, etc., and be able to say, "How you doing today, baby?" There's something in just that phrase that means something, because I know that the power of Black girl magic for some people is a healing thing. So when I see a Black queer kid and I say, "Baby," and I see that smile light up, they know what that means. And it's an amazing thing. We've got another question, and somebody wants to know if are some, any, or most faith communities and churches welcoming? I can say in my case, not always. I speak honestly in saying the Black church tends to hold up a great deal of ideas that come out of white supremacy. And so being a queer kid, it wasn't always safe or welcoming. 2016 was the first time that I'd ever set foot in a church in which I was referred to with female pronouns. It's never happened. Well, it has happened. I attended an MCC, but I grew up Southern Baptist. So this was the first, so 2016 was the first time I had ever been in a Black church in which I was referred to with female pronouns. Other than that, it's never happened in my lifetime. I often say that I never left the church left me. I still sing. I still believe in the power that is light and that is God in that sense, because I'm a singer. And there's something about being able to open my mouth, and, you know, the word gospel means to make a joyful noise. There is something about being able to open my mouth to sing and praise and worship that's important for me. It's a part of the healing, it's a part of the living. And, that's where I am with it. So.
I would say I would agree as far as some churches being okay. I didn't find any affirming churches until I was much older. And by that time, I had definitely moved more to a neo-pagan mindset. I have found wonderful pastors. I have found faithful individuals. But as far as whole congregations, there's MCC seems to be universal as far as accepting, and at least up here. But it's just, it's not anything that I'm interested in at this point. I believe in universal light. I believe that there is more. I believe that, we are guided by a force beyond us. I do all of those things, but I really personally, I believe they exist? Yes. Have I found one personally myself that I'm comfortable attending? No.
If you think of trans people you know who might not be as trans as you are, what could a faith organization in particular do to welcome people, or maybe people who have been attending and are thinking about transitioning and are first confronting questions about their identity? How could a community be supportive of those people and open to those people?
Ask
I
them what
did.
they need. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I would say I didn't quite hear the question, so I'm going to. I'm what I was able to piece together is if someone comes and they're talking about transitioning, how important is community? Is that
Or is it how
How can
can
we be supportive of somebody, whether they are just thinking of transitioning or maybe just not as confident? You three are very confident, so much so that you were willing to come on here as panelists and talk to a bunch of strangers. Some people are not as confident as you are. How can we be supportive of those people and inclusive of them when they first come in, so they know that we're trying to be a safe space?
I mean, first,
go ahead, Emperor.
yeah, go ahead, Lexi.
It's compassion. I mean, hands down, it's treat people like people. This is easy. I mean, I don't mean to put words in anybody's mouth, but this is easy for the three of us because we do this sort of thing all the time. We stand in front of groups of people and talk about these experiences all the time. That's why it's easy for us. Anybody else? Simply treat them with common decency and compassion. This is going to sound awkward. You all don't worry about their transition, because that's something that they have to work on. And I am certain that the people around them, including those people in the queer community, are going to be there. You're looking at elders within the queer community. I own the fact that the average age for a Black trans woman or a trans woman of color is 35, because they are usually met with some sort of violence. I turned 49 in December. In my own community and across the country, I am considered one of the elders. So when someone tells me that a young Black or a young brown queer kid is talking about transitioning, I can guarantee you that I'm one of the people who's going to get that phone call, because there's something in my experience that speaks to what they're going through, and they can see that there is a possibility that they will not be that statistic. And so treat people, my first lesson and first rule is always treat people how you want to be treated. Everything, some things in a person's transition aren't your business. Their genitals aren't your business. What hormones they're aren't your business. What hormones they're on aren't your business. What surgeries they've had aren't your business. Treating them with human decency and compassion, that's your business.
Yep.
One
Yeah,
thing that I would say,
100%. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh, one of the things that I would say in terms of faith-based organizations is, you know, it's one thing to put up a rainbow flag and say that you're a welcoming congregation or you're a welcoming house of worship or, you know, whatever. How that actually plays out for people, I think, is very different than just putting up a flag. So um, some of the ways that I have seen other faiths handle transition in a way that's affirming. I have a number of friends who are Jewish who have post-transition gone through either a bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah as a way of their synagogue welcoming them now as an adult participant in their affirmed gender. You know, not all synagogues are going to do that, but some do. And because that tends to then be something celebrated by the entirety of the congregation, the word gets out that that is now a synagogue where people feel safe to go if they happen to be trans. But I think, you know, as Lexi was saying, treat people with compassion and don't ask the questions you shouldn't be asking anybody in the first place anyway. You know, if somebody comes in and says, you know, I'm thinking about transition, just ask them, well, how are you doing with that? What kind of support system do you have around that? How can we help you to gain more support? Beyond that, you don't need to do anything more than that. That in and of itself is enough. Don't ask what their plans are. Don't ask where they're going to get surgery, what they're going to get. Don't ask them about whether they're going to be on hormones or not. And, you know, and don't make assumptions about what any of those things may or may not be for that person. Simply saying, well, that's really exciting news. I'd love to hear more if you want to tell me more. But also, how can I support you? That's a question that I think we tend to forget to use in most circumstances anyway, which is simply, how can I support you?
Yep.
And that's going to be different for every person.
Yep. I'm just doubling back on what everybody's saying. Compassion, active listening, super important. I think as people who are good of heart and wanting to help, often we will listen to react and not listen to hear. So it's really important that you're aware of that. You know, and if a person asks for things that are outside of your skill set or your wheelhouse, it's really okay to say, you know what, I don't think I can help you with that, but you know, I'm willing to do the research, or but maybe there's somebody else, you know, or but here's a website, or hey, we talked to the, you know, we had these 3 speakers at our thing, you know, last year, and we can totally reach out to them and they'll help us. Like, you know, it's okay to not know. We are not all experts. We can't be on things that aren't our experience. But the compassion part and active listening part and being present, phenomenally, it's a phenomenal need, and it really goes a long way in helping and making people feel welcome in your spaces.
Well, one of the things that we haven't covered, we've done some kind of advanced abstract ideas that have been awesome. And I don't know what the experience of all of our participants is. Do you want to give some just like really basic vocabulary? What do some of the acronyms actually mean? What are some of the words that people may have encountered and not quite know what they mean or how to use them?
Well, I'm going to preface all of that by quoting a good friend of mine who many years ago gave me probably the best advice ever when it comes to terminology and acronym, when it comes to LGBTQ folks. If you haven't talked to somebody under the age of 18 in the last 6 months, you have no idea what the terminology is. In the 27 years since I transitioned, in the 40 plus years that I've been out as queer, the language that we use to talk about who we are has changed dramatically. And it continues to change. So I almost hesitate to say what any particular term means because it's a constantly evolving, it's just a constantly evolving piece, right? I think in broad strokes, what we can say is that trans or transgender, more trans than transgender, but trans basically is an umbrella that gets used to encompass a broad variety of people who feel that their gender identity and expression is not necessarily opposite to, but different from whatever their assigned birth gender was, or assigned birth sex, I should say. Non-binary, Lindsay?
Yeah, so I'll just share a story. When I was trying to figure out what was going on with me, which was took so long, and I'm still figuring it out. But I mentioned in passing I was at a queer event with a very mixed group of people from all over the spectrum, and I thought this is a safe space. It was like 10 years ago, and I had said something about, I'm really, the more I look at it, the more I think about it, I really feel like I fit more in non-binary. There's just been lots of things that have happened and that I've experienced in my life that just, it's just, that's where I'm at. That's the basic crux of it. And the person looked at me and he said, "How old are you?" And I was like, mid-30s. He's like, "You can't be non-binary." I was like, "What?" I was like, what do you mean? I can't, what? And he goes, "Well, that's for kids. Not, adults aren't non-binary." And I was like, what the what? I had to walk away. I was like, it really does change a lot. And I am so privileged in multitudes of ways, but also because I work with kids and they keep me on my damn toes. It's just best if you don't know a term, if somebody uses it, to ask, because how I identify as non-binary is I don't feel I fit either way. I have had experiences, I realize how I look and that I am very femme presenting, and I am finally okay with that, and it really feels good. But like, I have never really felt either way. And I was in a relationship for 7 years that I was very much treated like a man. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it at all. I was very uncomfortable and I never felt enough. And as in previous incarnations, I was very much treated female all the time with all those expectations. Again, it was like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Like, it just didn't fit. And now that I really wish I had been able to come to this earlier in my life, because the type of comfort I have now, I've never experienced before. I don't feel resentful when I get up and I look at myself in the mirror, and I don't have the weight of the negativity that I had previously. It really is just finding that word and that label to fit me, made me feel whole. And I think that's how a lot of folks feel. My experience in talking to people and working with the community is when they finally find themselves in whatever way that means, it's more than a word. And so, you know, there are basic terms that you could talk about, but you're just going to be better off, especially since literally in the last 5 years, I have learned more about how people identify and neopronouns and everything else than I had in the 10 years previous. The language changes a lot. So just ask, you know, because it is going to be personal. It's very much going to be personal. If there's a specific question about a specific term that somebody's confused about, I'm sure that we wouldn't mind sharing our understanding of it, but just keep in mind that it's our understanding of it.
See, at the risk of going back to any of the medical stuff, we do have a question from someone I know as a nurse who said, as a healthcare person, she's concerned with legalities in dealing with legal names, names on the chart, requested name, positive identification for treatments and medicines. And asked Spencer, especially since he's an attorney, said, what do I need to know? So
Well,
focus on the legal rather than medical, I guess, if you
yeah.
can.
So, you know, from a legal perspective, particularly here in the United States, we live in a place where you have 50 states plus US territories plus the federal government, all of whom have different rules, regulations, and laws as it relates to identity. Super unhelpful. So what that ends up meaning for a lot of trans and non-binary people is that our legal documentation often does not reflect who we are or how we live our lives. Example, if you're born in the state of Ohio, currently, you cannot change your birth certificate ever. You can change your name, you can change your gender marker on your driver's license, but you can't change your birth certificate. If you go to get a US passport, you need your birth certificate in order to get a US passport. Once you get your passport, however, you can get a letter from your primary care physician indicating that you are trans and that you should have whatever gender marker it is that you should have on your passport. Same with Social Security. If you're from a state like Washington State, where I'm from, changing all of your documents is super simple. That is the result of work that I and others have done over the years in terms of making it super easy to change your name, change your gender marker on your driver's license, change your birth certificate. In fact, the Washington State birth certificate policy is what led to the US State Department's change in policy on passports under the Obama administration. So in terms of the legalities of what you call patients in a healthcare setting, I want you to think about the rest of your patients who are not trans or non-binary. If their legal name is Robert Smith, do you call them Bob? Do you call them Bobby? Do you call them whatever name it is that they go by? Sure you do. There's nothing wrong with that. As long as you and everybody else knows who you're referring to in any given moment. And particularly in hospital settings, people have, their identification badge on them. Whatever name is on that should correspond to what's on the chart. Legally, you're under no obligation to use whatever is on their birth certificate. You're not legally obligated to use what's on any piece of paper at all. Certainly, you're not required to use whatever the insurance company has on their paperwork. The only people that really need to know that information is the billing office. That's it. Whoever your billing office is that deals with the insurance company, those are basically the only people that ever need to know somebody's quote unquote legal name, whatever that means for the purposes of medical care. But in terms of treating your patient, treat your patient with compassion and care and call them what name they use. Use the pronouns that they use. As Lindsay pointed out earlier, these are not preferences. These are the names that people have. These are the pronouns they have. So I think that, it ultimately, it just comes down to treating the person in front of you with dignity and respect. Don't worry about the legalities. You're not going to get in trouble for calling somebody by their name. You might get in trouble for misgendering somebody or using their dead name when they've already told you what their name is.
It might be worth explaining that term dead name and why it's a problem to use it.
Well, for most of us, we choose a name that is something that fits for us. And if you insist on using the name that somebody was given by their parents, that can be fraught with all sorts of problems for people. And not just for trans people, it can be fraught with problems for anybody that changes their legal name for any reason, whether that's family trauma history, whether that's just not associating with that name anymore. There's lots of reasons why somebody might not want to use their birth name. But essentially, when you do that with somebody who's trans or non-binary, what you're saying is, I refuse to accept who you are. I'm only going to deal with you based on something that happened to you at birth that you had zero control over, but that's how I'm going to continue to identify you. So it's a matter of saying, you're basically saying to somebody, I have no respect for you. And I'm not going to treat you with any kind of respect. I'm going to completely disregard your feelings in this and in all matters. You simply don't matter.
Yeah, I just want to add to that I don't think people understand that aren't of trans experience how much pain and stress that can cause people. Where I worked before was a mental health agency, and we had some new staff that weren't quite with it for some reason. And there was a client that had been coming for a long time, and for whatever reason, they kept misgendering them. And I would go up to the front and correct, and go up to the front and correct, and go up to the front and correct. And by 2 weeks in, they literally, I'm not a therapist, I do youth programs. But they came into my office and literally just flopped on the floor and started just a heap of tears. And the person wasn't doing it on purpose, but it doesn't matter. Like, there was something wrong with the paperwork, and like, they just weren't getting it. And it really ruined this person's whole day, like every time it happened. And in medical settings specifically, we're already vulnerable walking in there. Like, we're walking in there because we have an issue, we need a checkup, we're worrying about stuff. We don't need that kind of crap. Nobody does. So it's, again, dignity and respect.
And I saw the question come up, is it the same for pronouns? Absolutely. Absolutely.
I have to say that I have been blessed when it comes to that. Um, Alexandra is actually my middle name. Um, I was blessed because when I came out to my father and told my father who I was, when I first told my dad that I was gay, let me explain. My father is no longer with me. Both of my parents passed from COVID in February, um, 4 days apart. My dad and I had a very strong relationship, and my father and I would joke constantly. So when I came out to my father and told my dad that I was gay, my father's response to me was, "Well, duh, stupid." That was his that was his response. When I came out to my dad as trans, he went, "Whew, you figured it out." I was nervous. I wasn't sure if you were going to do it. I had two conversations. I had the conversation if you figured it out, and I had the conversation that if you didn't figure it out, you had me worried, girl. That's what my father said to me. I used Teddy. Now, when I was younger, being called Miss Teddy was this very horrible, horrible thing because people were basically treating me badly and being abusive about it. Now, all of my kids call me Miss Teddy, and I absolutely love it. My name is Teddy. I am named after my father, and I am grateful for that because when I told him who I was, it could have gone left, and it didn't, and it never did. And for 48 years, it was the two of us. And the hardest thing for me right now is I'm the only one. And so right now, I, I it's not even something that I could think about. I couldn't even think about changing my name now because I can't. And I was never worried about anybody dead naming me before. And I'm certainly not in that mindset now. Go ahead, call me that. You know, call me that. Because the more you call me that, the closer I am to him. And so again, like Lindsay said and like Spencer said, it's about respect. Everything going on is about respect. I'm not here to change anybody's life. I'm not here to change anybody's life. I'm here to live my own. And one of the pieces of advice that I live by is something that my grandmother would say. It's not what they call you. It's what you answer to. Thank you. Thank you so much for the condolences. But that's what it is. It's what you answer to. Language is tricky. And remember it. And sometimes with language, it's intent versus impact. You may not mean for something to be nasty, but you don't know where anyone is in that precise moment in the day where you're talking to them. You might meet me at 5 o'clock, but you have no idea what happened to me at 4:50. And so where we are, treat people well. Treat people with grace, treat people with dignity, treat people with blessings. Because sometimes once you say something, darlings, you're never going to get it back.
How could it from you, trans person, trying to kind of support? I'm listening to your story, Lexi, especially the support you found in your family. And I know so many people don't have that, especially from their families of origin. and often, too often, quite the opposite. If somebody is not already connected and not already supported, then how can they find that kind of community? Maybe they're in a rural area, maybe they're not in Pittsburgh or somewhere where there's a big city community. How do they find it?
Well, you know, it's gotten a whole lot easier than it used to be. Uh, that's for sure. I mean, I remember coming out as a queer kid in Minnesota in 1976. And, you know, at that time it was, you met one other queer person who then introduced you to the other queer people that they knew, and you sort of grew your connections that way. And to some extent, I think that's still true. But what we do have today, which is generally available to most folks, is access through the internet. So if you are in a more rural area, you can connect with people literally everywhere else in the world by doing some simple searches. There are, and I would urge you, if you have young people that you interact with, there are a number of online support groups for young people who are trans that people can access from literally anywhere. If you have friends who are parents who have a trans or non-binary or questioning youth, there are support groups for parents that they can access, which is incredibly useful. You know, one of the things that we've seen this past year, not even this, I mean, here we are, it's not even July. There have been over 250 legislative bills brought in 34 states, primarily targeting trans youth, both around sports participation, but also around access to healthcare. And in some cases, trying to criminalize parents being supportive of their gender nonconforming children. Criminalizing medical care providers for giving assistance to youth. So it's a scary landscape that a lot of families are navigating these days. So providing one another support is incredibly important. And there are, you know, for folks that are on various platforms on social media, there's lots of ways to connect with other people who share affinity with however it might be that you identify.
I would suggest if you're not in a city area, there are often at least a P flag within a couple hours range. Trevor Project, they usually have lists of different community support groups. Also, not all of your local gay and lesbian community centers will be trans affirming. I've had success, but I also ended up running the one here in Pittsburgh for 6 years accidentally. But you know, a quick Google search will put you in touch with some community centers. There actually is, I'm trying to remember, if you Google National GLBT Community Center, there is a website that literally lists all of them from all over the country. I'm sorry, I can't recall it right now. I just know that Proudhaven, the place that I'm co-chair of that does housing for homeless LGBT youth 18 and up, we just became part of the network, but I don't have the paperwork in front of me. But if you Google it, it'll come up. But those are good places to start. I've worked with PFLAG in the past here in Pittsburgh. They're very, very trans affirming, and they do a lot of work with parents. And what I really dig about PFLAG is that they meet parents where they are. The first time I walked into a meeting, I wasn't quite prepared because I walked in thinking, this was years ago, that these were everybody, this was a group of people that was all on the same boat. They're all like good with their kids and everything's cool. The kids were fine. They were all hanging out in one room, and but the parents were in the other. And I walked in when questions were being asked that I wasn't prepared to hear, because again, I made an assumption. Um, but it was really great for that space to be there so that those parents could talk to these adults that were with it, and could get the answers and resources they need. So definitely a great resource. There you go, lgbtcenters.org. Yes, thank you.
Something else that we haven't addressed that might be worth mentioning is to discuss the difference or crossover between sexual orientation versus gender identity and how those interact.
Well, that's a big question. So if there's a really great resource that you can find online called the Gender Bread. I think it's even just genderbread.org. So there's a little drawing of a gingerbread person. And it talks about just the differentiation between assigned birth sex, gender identity, which is about how you feel about yourself, right? Gender expression, which is the outward ways in which you present your gender, and sexual orientation, which is about who you are either romantically and or sexually attracted to. Now, how those things interact, for me at least, in my experience, is that gender identity to some extent informs sexual orientation, but obviously they're two different things, right? So, and by what I mean when I say that it informs is, and I'm going to use this example from transmasculine folks. So there's a number of transmasculine folks that I know and have known over the years who prior to transitioning may have identified as lesbians and primarily partnered with women. And after they transition, they identify as gay and partner primarily with men. Now, well, why is that? I mean, is it that being gay is the through thread in sexual orientation, so that regardless of what their gender presentation happens to be, they're just gay on either side of that transition line? Probably not. What I have figured out in talking to literally thousands of people is that when you are able to live authentically and you present authentically and other people see you for who you are, it opens the door for you to express yourself with other people in a way that you might not have done previously. So for trans men who grew up assigned female at birth and with all of the attendant expectations that society places on women, girls and women, they may have grown up saying, you know what, I don't want to be sexual with men. I have no interest in being sexual with men because it's fraught with all of these other expectations of how I'm supposed to be as this presumptively female person, right? And when they transition and they are now able to be seen as the men that they know themselves to be, and other men see them in that way and desire them, and they desire those men, it's because they're coming from that place of being male and being able to be sexual with other men. Whereas before they may have done something that maybe was not necessarily easier, but at least maybe more expected, if that makes sense. So gender identity, I think, does influence how we perceive our sexual orientation and what we're open to. You know, and the reality is that, especially here in this country, we live in an incredibly repressed society when it comes to discussions about sex and sexuality in general. You know, everything is supposed to be a very particular way, one man, one woman, completely binary, missionary position sex for the purposes of procreation. That's the way marriage laws are written in the vast majority of states, or they used to be. Until Obergefell, but that is still sort of the presumption that we have, and we also don't talk about sex in a way that is adult. We talk about it like we're sniggering, 11-year-olds who are like out, in the corner of the gym at school and about, ooh, I saw my dad's Playboy, or ooh, I heard this other thing. We don't treat it's treated as both titillating and offensive at the same time, which sort of gives you whiplash when you think about it. Like, how are you supposed to react and talk about sex and sexuality in any kind of a meaningful way if that's the viewpoint that you're given? And so, one thing I will say now, looking at young people, my daughter's a sophomore in high school, and I listen to the kids that she goes to school with. The kids are okay. It's the adults that are the problem. The kids are cool. They're good. They get it. And they're having really good, meaningful conversations about what consent is and why it's important. They understand why being sexually healthy is important. They understand monogamy and non-monogamy and poly relationships. Like, they're way more with it, the kids of today, than I think we give them credit for. And they're certainly way more on top of it than any of us that are over the age of, say, 35 are. But that's just my take. Other people may have a different take.
I have a very, I'm going to be horrible. My mother was not very accepting of who I was. So my joke is always, I really don't know what she's complaining about. She did get a straight child. I mean, I just happened to have to turn into a girl to give her that. um, I acknowledge that I am a trans woman who lives in the binary. I'm, for all intents and purposes, if you got to put a label on it, oh my goodness, gasp, clutch the pearls, I'm a straight woman. I mean, I'm a straight woman who happens to be in a polyamorous relationship. Whee! Somebody to carry my purse, somebody to carry my suitcase. It's absolutely perfect. I think that when it comes to having those discussions, like Spencer was saying, you transition to, we became who we were. Like, my thought for me was always, this is who I am. I'm female. And I know that the outside is not gelling with the inside. And now that I can be that, and as they say, live in my truth. I live as honestly as I know how. I was not able to at first, and that's where the madness was. That's where the chaos was. That's where the mental health issues were, not being able to live honestly. Once I started living honestly and not really caring what people thought, it became a breeze. It became this, all of the weight. I don't know about anybody else, but I can say the first time I took that first dose of estrogen, this weight lifted off of my shoulders, and it was like, oh, this is what it's supposed to be. And at that point, I didn't look back. I didn't look back. And it became as honest and as open as can be.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing about sexuality and gender is that you can't make assumptions. You just can't. If I had a time machine and I talked to 18-year-old Lindsay, that no, this is not how I imagined my life would be and what I'd be doing. But I am the best me I have ever been in my entire life now, because I accept all of me. And while that my moment was not necessarily with hormones, but just finally filling my circle, my inner circle, with the people that truly saw me, that love me as I am, and did their best to understand me. In addition to being, again, I said this earlier, being able to look at myself and not feel like I was performing or doing things for other people. That this is me, and that it doesn't make me less it doesn't make me less non-binary to be okay wearing makeup now. Um, the most affirming experience I had was with my coworker at my previous job. They came in and they were the first person that I had been able to work with who was out and non-binary, and I was so freaking excited. And we were talking one day, and they're also femme presenting. Um, but I was like, I feel fake. I don't feel real. I feel like I have to do this little dance, and I don't feel like people see me. And we had this whole conversation about the validity of the expressions of non-binary folk. Um, and both came to the conclusion that we are just as valid femme expressing non-binary people as mask expressing or not or androgynous expressing non-binary people. My friend has chosen to have some surgeries and has done some other stuff. I do not. I know lots of other people that are non-binary that express it in many different ways. And we're all, as far as our sexualities, we're all over the map. Quite literally. I was very much a dykey dyke at 18 years old. But like I'm not anymore. I'm poly, I'm pan, and like I I like who I like, how and when I like them, and that's just it. Um, and knowing that I can be who I am and be loved and love others that I wish, when I wish to, has been very, very freeing. My mom told me years ago that when I turned 40, I would start to care less about what other people thought. And I really thought she was off record. But I have to tell you, at 44, she was absolutely correct. And, it comes, that's part of the reason why I do what I do. I want the people around me. I want the kids that I work with. I want the adults that I work with. I want them, it's not sunshine and rainbows every day. I struggle too, but like it is 150% better, 500% better than when I was a teenager, and like just being able to wrap my own head around what makes me happy, who I am, and who I want to be with has made a world of difference. So the short answer to that initial question is there is some correlation, but it's not definite. And it goes back to, again, talking to the individual. You cannot make assumptions because somebody is trans or non-binary, that they're going to be any particular sexuality. They can express them, any of them, period.
We have other questions from any of the other people here. Oh, we do have one here in the question and answer thing from somebody who asked it anonymously, who said, this question is under the medical topic. Is there hormone therapy for non-binary people? Like a hormone therapy that makes you look neutral? I can't take testosterone because it causes mental health issues, and I identify as non-binary. I'm assigned female at birth, if that helps.
So I can share some experiences that my friends and my community has had that they have shared with me, or I have gone to appointments with them, or I strongly encourage you to talk to your doctor, because some folks who have issues with testosterone will have issues with testosterone at a particular level via a shot versus maybe not having as strong a reaction to topical application. I know lots of trans guys that, you know, they wanted some of the physical changes, the body hair, the thickening of the neck, the shoulders, the redistribution of body fat and stuff that sometimes happens, but they didn't want it all at once. And so they chose to do the gel, and it worked great for them. Other people, again, please go to a trusted doctor, but they, you know, use supplements to increase the testosterone level. There are things that you can talk to your doctor about. Instead of taking anything with testosterone, you could maybe talk to your doctor about using things to suppress some of the estrogen. There's lots and lots of different ways to do it. You don't, it's the all or nothing thinking can cause a lot of harm. So definitely talk to your doctor. There's lots of different options. And it doesn't just have to be biochemical. There are things that you can do as far as like how you walk, how you talk, how you modulate your voice, how you dress. There's lots of ways to do it. I hope that answered your question.
Well, this is probably a pretty quick and easy one, but it's worth putting out there. If somebody accidentally misgenders you, what's the best thing they can do to recover from it and move on?
Say I'm sorry and move on. That's it. Once you go past a simple, oh, I'm sorry, and move on, you've now made it about you, not about the person you misgendered. Don't make it about you.
Yeah, you made it a whole mess.
Yeah.
We're all human. We make mistakes. Just say I'm sorry and
It
keep
happens.
moving.
I mean, any of us who come from families with multiple children know that you're going to be called some other name at some point. Right? Like
That's how you. I don't know about.
names.
I don't know.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that worked for anybody, but my mother was the second oldest child in her family, and she would go through everybody until she got to me or to whomever, because it's me and my two sisters. So we always knew that we had a little bit of time to run, and so being it's true. She would, or she would, you know who I'm talking to. You right there. I have often found, because even when I was younger, like prior to transitioning, people would say I was a girl and I would get offended about it. And then it got to a point where I realized that I was very comfortable in the blur, and it didn't matter. And so now, like I said, I work with children. So you can imagine the questions I get. And so I always get, Miss Teddy, are you a boy or a girl? And my response, because I have some parents who are not comfortable with me, I never address it. I simply say to my kids, I'm Miss Teddy. Does it really matter? Do I take care of you? Do I do this? Do I do that? And they go, well, yeah. I said, well, then do you really need to know? I guess not. Do. And they wander away. And so, you know, or I'm snarky. So I have even more hateful responses when people misgender me. But it's always, you know, my favorite is to just sort of look, because I know that estrogen has shifted my body a lot these days. So, when you find yourself staring down, being stared down by somebody who kind of looks like Eartha Kitt, it gets a little bit intimidating. So you just smile and bat your eyes and walk away and keep going. It's like Spencer said, you do it. I used to get offended. Now I don't, because again, it's impact versus, and it's intent and impact. You can tell when someone is being demeaning and insulting. You really can. And you can tell when it literally is just a slip, like, I didn't mean to do that. There are far too many other things in the world that I can take seriously that I don't have time. But I think that difference also, and this is me being honest, is someone newer in transitioning versus someone older and more settled in their space. Because early on, had you done it, I would have flipped out on you. Now I'm like, meh, whatever. Like, if you can come up with a new one to insult me, I will give you points. If you just do something where it's the same old crap that I've heard, every day of my life, I'm just like, whatever.
I don't know if you have an example or just an idea, but what if somebody who is just a bystander sees somebody who is transgender being harassed, like, or being confronted or being denied the right to exist in a space? How can a bystander be helpful in that situation?
Speak up.
Mm-hmm.
Speak up. Forgive my French. No. It's not you. No, I'm answering your question. I'm sorry, we were. Like, forgive my French. I am going to just simply say it like this: open your damn mouth and say something. Like, open your damn mouth and say something. When you see racism, speak. When you see sexism, speak. When you see misogyny, speak. When you see transphobia, speak. When you see biphobia, speak. When you see homophobia, speak. Open your damn mouth. Don't just stand there and go, well, it's not me. You know what? To use the most important moment, do like the little girl did, do like the young lady did in the George Floyd case. Turn on your phone, record what's going on, open your damn mouth and speak. Because it's just like and to, again, going back to working with my kids, I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees. I speak for the trees have no tongues. Or better yet, when they came for me, there was no one to speak. You would want somebody to stand up for you and speak. Then you be willing to put yourself in that same situation and you stand up.
One of the things that you can also do that's incredibly effective is go to the person who's being harassed, go to the person that's visibly othered, stand near them, turn your back to whoever the asshole is, and ask the person, hey, are you okay? Is there something I can do for you? Or act like you know them and just take them out of that situation. Just walk up and go, oh, hey, it's so good to see you. I wasn't expecting to see you today, but that's great. Let's go over here. I'd love to talk to you. Take them out of harm's way. And if you can't take them out of harm's way, at least put yourself in between them and the asshole. Because what assholes want is attention. And if you refuse to give them attention, they got nothing. But absolutely do something, whether it's saying something, whether it's talking to the person, whatever it is, like Lexi said, say something. Don't just stand by and let it happen.
almost right at 9 o'clock. Did anybody have anything else that they wanted to ask or wanted to add in?
Well, thank you to all of you for being here and for great questions
Absolutely.
and for being willing to be sources of light in your communities. And on a personal note, for me, Lexi, it's really good to see you, sweetheart.
You too. Oh my gosh. It's like, it's been forever.
I know.
We have a question down here that says, how can we applaud? So just know you're getting lots of applause here. I'm not sure that Zoom has a good answer.
Just, you know what? Here's the best way to applaud. Take the things that we've said, take them to heart, and go out and simply be better.
110%. Yep.
Be better.
That's right.
Oh, look at this. Look, Lindsay's hair and style and Spencer's beard and Lexi's nails and bandana. Look at that.
You know, the bandana, and I know we've got to go. The bandana is a sort of tribute to my aunt, who was a mentor for me. Most people are used to seeing me high glam, you know, as I like to say, 10,000 pounds of hair and 6-inch stilettos. But I work with children and they don't care how glamorous I am. They care about if they can have a snack. That's important to them. And so this is just sort of my go-to. And my aunt and she was very much my mom as well. A lot, you know, she was that person. She was my go-to person. And she and I look a lot alike. And I found myself just sort of going to these because they were sort of her style. And it's how I feel about shoes. If you like them, you buy one in every color. And I have them in every color. So it's a fabulous thing. So thank you all for letting me be here with you this evening. It's been a blessing. So I hope that, you know, you've learned something and take it with you.
Can't hear you.
Your sound's
Nope,
off.
I'm just
Sorry about that. We'll thank our panelists yet again and all the attendees and they said thank you especially for being so patient as we figured out how to do the first one of these webinars. For anybody who wants to know, in July, we're going to do one. We have a professor from Misericordia in Pennsylvania who has written several books, including one on the topic, that he's doing a presentation on racial justice and superheroes and on how you can trace the history of racism and racial justice by looking at superheroes in comics and in popular fiction. And I probably won't do a good job of explaining it, but I promise he will. He's a really interesting guy. So that will be our topic next month. And we want to invite anybody who's here to keep coming and see what else we have coming up. We have some good things in the pipeline. Also, are the three of you willing to be contacted at all? Paul, if there's somebody who has follow-up?
Absolutely.
sure.
Yep.
This has been recorded, so we'll have it posted. It may take us a little bit to get it posted. I'm not sure if it'll take a few days for it to be ready. There was something with Zoom that it takes a while, but I'll make sure that, or we'll get Elaine, who handled all of the behind the scenes things there, to make sure that the link goes out. And please feel free to share the recording. so that other people can benefit from watching it. We had several people who were interested in coming tonight and couldn't make it. So please share the recording as widely as you like. Do any of you have an organization, a support organization that you want to mention before we close out?
You know what? If you're looking to donate to various charities, I am a member of the Imperial Court System. I am a former Empress of Chicago. So you can look at Imperial Court of the Wind. You can look at the Windy City Empire. I currently live in Iowa, so you can also look at the Imperial Court of Iowa. They have some wonderful charities that they are working with this year. So send and support.
There's a charity that I highly support called Rad Remedy, RAD Remedy, .org, which is run by a trans man, and basically they provide connections to mental health care professionals and medical care professionals throughout the country. So it's kind of a clearinghouse of, here are some really great providers that you can access in a variety of areas. And so I highly encourage donating to them.
Sounds amazing. There's a couple. I'm co-chair of Proudhaven. It's been around for 8 years. It's based in Pittsburgh. We do homeless outreach and youth drop-in for 18 plus TLGBTQIA. And Trans Pride Pittsburgh, which has been around for 11 years, and I helped to co-found. We do community advocacy specifically around trans and non-binary issues. We're trans and non-binary run. And also Trans Uniting, which is my friend's organization that I help her with. And she specifically advocates for Black and Brown trans youth and adults around homelessness and support and resources. And those all can be found online, Google and Facebook.
Thank you. Thank you. And I did put the link for our Quaker meeting if anybody is interested in more information. Absolutely, everybody is welcome to join us anytime you like. We have a discussion session at 10 o'clock every Sunday, followed by meeting worship at the whole quarter, which is a big section of Pennsylvania at 11 o'clock every Sunday. It's North Branch and Quaker meeting. It's North Branch Quaker meeting for our web address. So you can easily reach us through that. Anything else anybody wants to add? Any last questions? Oh, we have a note here. Free Mom Hugs is a supportive nonprofit. Yes. And even though I've been out longer than a lot of the moms have been alive, I still have a Free Mom Hugs shirt because I like giving hugs, and pre-COVID, that was a thing. Hopefully I'll be able to wear my Free Mom Hugs shirt and walk in a parade within the next year. We'll be hugging again soon, yes. Yeah, I think we can wrap that up then.
Nice meeting everyone.
Okay, thank you so much. I really appreciate all of you being here. Thank you. Have a good night.